This is episode 8 with David Dilks. Your challenges don't define you. However, how you choose to handle them does. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Laugh at Adversity podcast. I'm your host, Gary Savoy. Having overcome medical trauma, I've made it my mission to uncover all of the secrets to overcoming life's challenges and living a better life. Each week, I will bring you an inspiring person or message. You'll hear from some of the most inspirational people on this planet, including those who have overcome adversity firsthand. My goal is to provide you with everything you need to conquer your challenges and to turn your struggles into strengths. With the heroin epidemic this country has been facing, this interview with David couldn't have come at a better time. At the early age of 4, David began his first career as a classical pianist and played competitively from ages 5 until 13. He even performed at Carnegie Hall in New York City and the Academy of Music in Philadelphia. However, while growing up, this isn't what David really wanted to do, and he often felt loads of pressure to continue playing and performing at a high level. In his teenage years, he began finding ways to escape reality by drinking beer and smoking weed. However, during his college years, painkillers became his go-to when he couldn't deal with reality anymore. After college, David would move to New York City to pursue his dreams of being a rock star. This is where he first encountered heroin. After staying clean for nearly 10 years from heroin, David would soon to start feel life's pressures again. As the stress was quickly building, he found himself needing escape yet again. As you'll find out in this interview, his addiction to pills and heroin wasn't so easy to give up this time. And after reaching his breaking point, he decided it was time for rehab. Now 2.5 years clean, David has become an advocate for helping others overcome their own heroin addiction. And he's even working on a book to help spread his story and help inspire others. In this episode, you'll learn why the stressful early years led him to finding ways to escape, and also what led him to trying heroin. You'll also learn how David was able to overcome his heroin addiction and how he's been able to handle triggers. We'll also discuss his biggest struggle so far with staying clean and why it's so important to have the right support system in any recovery, and also why he feels the need to share his story and help others. So without further ado, here's my interview with David Dilks. Hi, David. Welcome to the Laugh at Adversity show.
Hi.
So I would like to start off today by having you give a little bit of a background of your history and maybe a quick little bio.
Okay. All right. Well, my name's David, and I'm originally from a small town in southern New Jersey called Glassboro. And, typical kind of upper middle class upbringing. I have 2 sisters. I was the middle child. One thing that was different, though, is I started I was a classical pianist starting at age 4. And that pretty much consumed most of my childhood until about age 13. Competing every other weekend, practicing 2 hours a day. But it didn't last. I got to become a teenager and discovered different things, and moved away from classical piano. It was a stressful kind of childhood. Piano was pretty much the focus of everything. With that, if you got first place, things were great, and if you got anything less than third, things were not so great.
So a lot of pressure at an early age.
Yeah, and so especially I don't call being asked to play piano. It was just something that kind of happened one day. We just showed up at this guy's place, and he was my piano teacher. And I remember I hated it so much that I used to actually bite the piano. There are teeth marks still in my parents' and piano at their house in New Jersey. But I didn't have much of a say in it. But yeah. So along with that, though, I also grew up having a learning disability. I was dyslexic and diagnosed with ADD in the 7th grade, and then put on medication, Adderall, by a doctor. And I think that kind of was the beginning of what we're here to talk about today.
So in your teenage years, How did you react to the Adderall, and do you think it was any better? Did you have other events in your teenage years that kind of led you to what we're about to get into?
Yeah, I think, well, it was just kind of coming out of the whole piano thing. My mother, you know, she was a very high strung. Her herself, she to this day still has an issue with pills, and pills just became the answer to everything. If you weren't behaving properly, it's because you didn't take your medicine. And the opposite, if you're, behaving well or did something good, it's all because of the medicine. So, very quickly I became used to this idea, or ingrained in me, that, you needed to take a pill to feel good, to do well, to do all different kinds of things. And the pressure continued. And then, when I was 14 years old or so, I started drinking with my friends on the weekend and smoking weed, and just kind of trying to escape reality that I knew there. Yeah, so that was most of high school. And then once I had a chance to leave, I went to college as far away as I could, which happened to be in Virginia. It's the furthest I could get.
It's the furthest you could get away.
Yeah, that's the furthest I could get away.
So how did college go for you?
College is great. Not so much for the academics, but just for me kind of figuring out who I was. And I was in a lot of bands, and just kind of really learning who I was, getting out of the shadow or the thumbprint of my parents and what I had been in New Jersey. The flip side to that, though, is that I lost three of my four grandparents within 2 years, and during that time period, and I had a run-in with the law, as some college students do, and I had to face that by myself, and it was difficult, and so there was a point where I had to start escaping, and at this point I was taking painkillers to get away from it all, or to just be able to cope with what was going on.
So at this point, you were what, maybe 20, 21 years old, and you started taking painkillers?
Yeah, yep, 20 years old. Yep.
And it become like a frequent occurrence?
It did. It wasn't too bad at first because, I was in Southwestern Virginia, and didn't know a whole lot of people. So it was just kind of, if anybody got hurt, or, they came across every so often, and I always made sure to get what I could. And often I would trade Adderall, for painkillers. And that's a lot of how it happened, often that way. But yeah, and then it was so it kind of, again, was more of a weekend kind of thing, maybe. But then I moved to New York City to be in a band, and just the idea of being in a band in New York City and everything that happened. So that was the first time I got introduced to heroin, once I moved to New York City. Like the day I moved to New York City.
Really?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I had three bandmates, and they moved to New York before I did because I was younger, and so they moved there. I had a year of college to finish, and so they were all establishing themselves in New York, and I already had a place to live, and we already had a band space, so they were just waiting for me to get done and get up there so we could try to make it big as musicians. Didn't happen, but it got me, from Virginia to New York City.
So you were in your, what, maybe 22 maybe at this point, or?
Yeah, I moved to New York City when I was 22 or 23, I think. Yeah.
And was it the peer pressure, like the environment, that kind of led you to trying heroin?
Well, kind of. I mean, what was kind of funny is two of the guys in my band were, kind of a lot more straight-laced than myself and the other bandmate, and him and I were roommates, and the other two guys were roommates, and so I don't know, it was there, and I tried it, and it worked out really well, and I think, for some people, certain drugs do certain things. And in my case, which was also in the case of my mother, opioid or heroin or painkillers, whatever, uh, it doesn't have a calming effect so much as it has an energizing, feel good about yourself, I can do anything kind of effect.
Really?
Yeah, it almost, for me, when I would take them, it would get me to what I thought is what a normal person felt like. And and then from there, and then I could do what I needed to do, and I felt great about myself, and I just felt so different than I normally felt. It was just so appealing that it quickly became a habit.
So was it kind of giving you like a sense of confidence or like invincibility?
Yeah, it definitely, yeah. And in New York City, I don't, I didn't have a job right away, and I was doing odds and ends and trying to find a job, and it just made life there a lot easier, because it's hard. It's not an easy place to try to survive when you don't really know a lot of people.
Right, yeah.
And especially right out of school, and I hadn't lived in a large city. I moved there from like rural Virginia, where I had been for 5 years. So, yeah, it was just it was good. It made me feel good.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, New York City, I think just the hustle and bustle is definitely just an overwhelming place for anyone, especially someone, a young person, coming out of college and, trying to start up with a band.
Yeah.
So how long, like, was it just a kind of like a party thing with the heroin? Was it a daily occurrence? Like, when did the addiction really start happening?
Let's see. So this was the fall of 1999, and I would say by March of 2000, I was addicted for the first time. And what was bizarre about it is, I remember, me and my roommate, we ran out, or we didn't have any or whatever, and I was like going to go see my parents, and then I thought I had this horrible flu, and I was like, "What? God, I feel so sick." And I honestly thought that it was the flu, because I had never experienced that before. Withdrawing from it, and so the first time I did, it was just that I didn't even know what it was. I was just sick, and I was at my parents' house, and they kind of left me alone because I was older, and I got through it, and everything was fine. So that stuck for a while, because I don't know exactly how it happened, but we lost this guy's phone number. He was our only contact, and it just kind of ended.
So how long of a period of time was it that you were, kind of clean and you went through that withdrawal phase?
After that, let me see. I hadn't, probably a good 10 years not touching heroin. I mean,
Wow.
But there were times, obviously with painkillers, there was a different story, because they were so much more easier to get. If I got a cut or like hurt myself, or had a, emergency room or something, like, again, they were super easy to get, and, they weren't necessarily the habit yet. But, there was kind of foreshadowing it would snowball later on again, because back then you could order painkillers on the internet without a doctor's prescription. Oh yeah, super easy.
It's so scary.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. This, you could order 90 Vicodins for $100, and it was totally legitimate, as far as, I guess. Well, I don't know how legitimate it was, but you could do it. It came via UPS or FedEx. It showed up in your mailbox, so that became a really easy thing to do. But somehow I managed to keep it in check for a long time. Yeah. So, it became, again, like a weekend thing, or sometimes on the weekdays, for quite a while. And then one thing led to another. I got married. I moved to Rhode Island. I came here, one, to kind of get out of New York City, but also to go to grad school. And then I think the pressure of grad school kind of really started things back up.
Did it trigger it?
Yeah. I mean, because it's still been an off and on kind of thing, a weekend warrior, if you will. But just the pressure of grad school, and being in school again, and trying, and being newly married and in a new place, just kind of, I upped what I was doing. And, the crazy thing is, just to show you the kind of person that my mother is, she actually started sending me pills, trying like,
Wow.
yeah, like
It's enabler.
yeah, total enabler. He wanted to keep me like kind of right there, with her in that regard, on the pills.
I feel like that's a big connection too, right there. Is I feel like a lot of stories that I hear, heroin addicts, it starts with the pills.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's exactly how, this happened the last time, for me. Um, and it's crazy because I ended up getting in a car accident, in 2011, and I got T-boned, um, going up to Whole Foods in Providence, and the car left the ground, and luckily I was okay. I was by myself, thank God, because we had a 2-year-old boy at the time, then, and yeah, it was crazy. The car was totaled, and I was able to walk away from it, other than some pretty bad, lower back pain, whatever. But I went to go see a lawyer, and then he sent me to this doctor, and like the doctor's like, "All right, I'm going to give you this, this, and this," and it was almost like a pill mill, right there, and it got me right back into it, and it was just a steady source of painkillers, and from there on, 2011 moving up, it was just a steady. Increasing of dosage, and then moving from one type of painkiller to a stronger painkiller, and then through the years taking more and more and more, and then spending more and more and more money, and then being like, I can't spend this much money on this anymore, and then eventually you make the switch to heroin because it's cheaper and stronger, and and unfortunately there's this, well, at least for me, there was this point where I thought I was beating the system. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to, I can, this is so much cheaper, and I'll be able to feel good and do everything I need to do. And it wasn't, for me at this point, it was just kind of self-medicating. It wasn't, I wasn't going out and having fun with friends. I wasn't going to the bars. I was just basically doing what I needed to do. I needed to be a dad. I needed to have a job. I needed to do all these things. And just all of these pressures were just coming down on me. And I thought that this was the way that I could deal with it. Because it's all I knew from, 7th grade on. I
Right.
was told, you got to take a pill to do what you need to do. They make you feel good and makes you get your work done. And so that's all I didn't know any other way to deal with the stress, or to handle these things.
Yeah, it's especially, I know you were talking about, biting the piano earlier. So it sounded like you had a lot of stress as a child, and then it developed, as a teenager, and that's when the pills started. So it seemed like, there was always kind of a correlation where when the stress was kind of setting in that, you had to rely on the pills to get you better.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. That's it in a nutshell, really.
I was just going to ask how bad did it get this last phase?
Well, let's see. So I made that switch, to heroin again. I think it was spring of 2014, and was it 2000? No, I'm sorry, spring of 2015, and it had gotten to the point where I could easily spend $200 a day.
Wow.
Yeah, and again, I'm married and I have a son, and that kind of habit is hard to hide.
Yeah.
And my breaking point came later that fall, where I had taken money to build a guy's deck. And he gave me a deposit, and it was $2,500, and I was going to help him build this deck, and it was going to be great. And I ended up using all of that money within a week.
Wow.
Yeah. And what happened is, for whatever reason, the guy decided not to do it now, and he asked for his deposit back, and I couldn't give it to him. And at that point, it was real. Everything had just, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but everything had just kind of slowed down, and like, I don't have that money. He needs his money back. How am I going to get out of this one? Because, I had gotten really good at getting myself out of fixes and got really good at finding money, returning things to the store. You can do anything. When your habit is that bad, you can trick yourself into doing just about anything that you need to do so that you don't get sick, so that you can just maintain. And I remember driving to work that day, and I was getting deeper and deeper, and like these thoughts I were having, like, my wife and my son would be better off without me, and I'm no good. And it's like I wanted to crash my truck because not that I wanted to kill myself, but I thought that maybe hurting myself, getting in the hospital, would somehow fix this whole mess that I was in.
Right.
But it didn't, and I didn't do that. But what I did do is I drove to work, and I asked a co-worker for help that day.
Wow, really?
Yeah, sorry, it gets me a little verklempt, but yeah, and I just kind of came clean. And I think to some people that knew me, it was obvious that there was something wrong, even though I didn't think anybody knew anything. But some people had an idea that I wasn't who I was, used to be. And so he took me to Butler, and I got checked in to Butler. I spent 5 days there. And then went into their what they call and it's an inpatient outpatient program. So it's an intensive 5-day where you're there all day. And then from there I went to an IOP, which is another kind of intensive program for 6 weeks. And then I've been at the same place, counseling and with a doctor since then.
So it must have been a difficult, I think just asking the coworker for help, that must have been probably a difficult step for you, right?
Yeah, it was. And a lot of things kind of had to kind of play out the right way for it to happen, because, like the guy that I used to get my stuff from wasn't answering his phone, and, I was getting sick. And the other guy, needed his money back, and it was just, I couldn't deal it. I couldn't deal with it anymore. It was over. It was time to stop. And literally 5 minutes after asking for help, the guy all of a sudden starts calling me. He's like, "Hey, what's going on? Where do I need to meet you?" And I just,
Wow.
I had to just be like, "This is it." And so I just turned my phone off. And then I went to the hospital.
So it was literally like a perfect series of events kind of that helped you get into rehab.
Yeah. And then I gotta say that the doctor that I ended up seeing while I was in rehab, really, but he was a really good guy, and me being who I am, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this cold turkey, because I didn't want to take any medications. I was like, it's just subbing one thing for another, and I had all these kind of preconceived notions of how I'm going to do this, because I was like, oh, I've quit cold turkey before, but actually I've never been successful, because I always ended up either taking painkillers or going back to heroin again. So
right.
He was just like, well, these are the statistics, man. You can either get on a medicated based treatment and have a 95% chance of this being the end and getting on with your life, or you can try to do it your way, and you have a 5% chance of making it. And that was probably day 2 of me in the hospital. And at this point, I'm pretty sick. I'm having issues with both ends of my body at the same time. It was not a pleasant time for sure. And my wife, I spoke to her on the phone from the rehab place, and she was at that point, she was just like, I'm here for you, but if you mess up, if you relapse, me and our son, she was going to leave. And it was like, that kind of hit me so hard and so real, that I was like, all right, I can't mess this up. I can't, let that all go away forever. So yeah, I asked the doctor, I said, let's do it. Let's do what you think is best. And he put me on treatment, on the medication, and I have been clean since.
Wow. So that's been almost 3 years?
848 days, so almost two and a
Wow.
half years. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And you haven't had any relapses during that time?
Nope, not one.
How have you been able to handle like any triggers?
Um, let's see. In the whole, all the meetings and the groups and all these things that you go to, you really, if you're there and if you really, really, really want to change and do this, because oftentimes people that are there don't. Um, they give you the tools that to do it, and exercise is a huge help. I can tell now, like if I don't exercise every day or do some type of physical activity, I start to get really irritable. And even my wife can say, like, "Did you exercise today?" Because it has that much of an effect on your body and your state of mind.
Right.
And just breathing and just it's going to sound weird, but just stopping and just being grateful for things. And yeah, it's just they're so, I don't know, it's hard to describe. But I think for me to deal with the triggers, it's a lot to do with exercise and also just breathing and um,
Like becoming present and grateful and
yeah, just being present is a good word to use. Just being present and in the moment, and um, yeah, just realizing that whatever it is, it's not a big deal. Like you'll get through it. Um, it's not ever as big as you actually think it is.
so I guess what have been your biggest struggles during this time of staying clean? Do you have anything that comes to mind or like a few things that might come to mind?
I think one of the biggest things that I have done that was an issue is I basically don't speak to my mother anymore. She's a huge trigger in my life,
Right.
and I've just had to really, and I've done a lot of work with a regular therapist outside of addiction therapists. I have two different therapists, but we've done a lot of work, dealing with some of the childhood trauma that I went through, with her. And when I do speak to her, it's on my terms. I control the conversation. I initiate the phone call, and I can end it anytime I want. But for a while, it was really hard for me to do that, and yeah, it would be a very difficult thing to do. To talk to her, and just to kind of put it in perspective. My younger sister, who experienced a lot of what I did growing up, she dealt with it a different way. She kind of, instead of going out and drinking and experimenting with drugs or whatever, escaping, she just kind of took it all in and just kind of buried it deep inside. And for her, it got to a point a couple of years ago where she tried to kill herself,
Wow.
just because of the stress and all the things to do with my mother. Yeah, so she's not only a trigger for me. I mean, she's a trigger for my sister. Yeah, so we both, have had our own issues to deal with because of it, but we're both doing good, so it's good.
Right. It seems to be better without having her, constant contact probably with her.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and then the everyday stuff. I've just kind of learned to let it go, and just not worry about it. The difference now from 848 days ago is it's like a 100% change in my view of the world and the way I go about dealing with things and dealing with people.
Yeah. I'd like to go into that. So I know, like for me, for my situation, I know before, like I had my surgery and everything, someone cutting me off would, piss me off and I'd be upset all morning or all day. And I let that carry, those emotions carry with me throughout the day. So do you see it differently now that you've been clean and you're kind of, focusing more on gratitude and being present and you kind of have a different perspective? Do little things that may have maybe triggered you before or angered you, do they not bother you as much now?
Yeah, they don't. I mean, I'm not a saint, someone cuts you off, there's still a little bit of like, hey, what was that about? But I've just come to realize that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, and that's a really great place to get to, and just to be able to let it go. The other thing that I've often now, in addition to just trying to practice, mindfulness and being grateful, is to just realize that no matter how bad I had it or will ever have it, there's at least another person who is experiencing what I experience it worse, or is worse off, and in any number of ways. And that just reinforces gratitude in me, and just like doesn't I don't have to sweat it. It's not a big deal. So what? I'll be 15 minutes late. It's not a big deal. It's not worth getting upset about.
Right. Yeah, I think that's actually a good point, because I think, like adversity is relative. So like, there are people, we might have an issue where someone cuts us off, but there are people in this world that, don't have clean water, or, maybe have just lost a parent, or, something that's much worse than our situation.
Exactly. I totally agree with that.
How do you feel when you tell someone you were a heroin addict? Because I think it's something that's very personal, and something you might not want to admit to. And I feel like it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and do this interview and share your story. So, what are your emotions when you talk about it?
It's getting better, and I let's see, like this interview is probably a huge step for me, and just being able to be able to tell people about it. A lot of the feelings I had about myself and about my addiction were just shame, and like just really based in this horrible feeling of shame, and like, how could I do this, and how could I do this to my family, and all of this, but it doesn't do you any good to kind of dwell there, and my wife has forgiven me, but more importantly, I've forgiven myself for doing it,
Right.
and yeah, it's getting better. It definitely is not an easy thing to do. Not too long ago, I got called for jury duty, and I ended up on a jury, and the judge, he was just an older white guy. He's like, if anybody in the jury has to talk to me about anything that could affect the case, so on and so forth, come up and we'll speak privately to the side with the attorneys, for the cases, or for the case. And I don't know why, but I felt the need to tell them about what I was going through. And it wasn't from a place that I didn't want to get out of jury duty. I don't know what it was. I just needed them to know that, this is who I am in a way, I guess. So, I told the judge, and, so it was the judge and the court clerk. And so she's typing everything down, and the two, prosecutors and defense attorney, and asked me all these questions like, well, how do you feel about the police? And like, I don't have any problem with the police. They weren't involved. And the judge, to his credit, was like, I understand that this is not, just what it used to be, that it goes from the boardroom, to the playground, and people from all walks of life are having issues with addiction, and especially opioid addiction. And, he was really very understanding of it. And he was like, well, do you have scheduled meetings? And I was like, no, at this point in my recovery, there's a good amount of trust that's been built between me and my, primary care providers, and they're very flexible now, which is great. And everything was good, and, okay, that's fine. Everything was fine. So I went back and sat back in the jury, and, I ended up getting dismissed, not because of that, but because my work wasn't going to pay me, the full amount of money, and that would become a hardship. And, it was great because the judge was like, I'm really sorry to lose you. You're a really stand-up guy. I wish you a lot of luck. And it was just a really unique kind of experience to have, in a courtroom with a judge. and especially being one of the first people that I decided to tell about my situation,
Right. It's
it was
probably
like,
the last person you would think to tell first.
yeah. And it just kind of happened. And, the court clerk grabbed me by the arm in the hallway and she was like, keep it up. It's so great that you're doing what you're doing and you can do it. And I was like, it was really great, unexpected support found in a very odd place. But, yeah. So that, and that experience, kind of helped me to, contact you to share my story now. So, hopefully with each step I take, I feel a bit more comfortable with it. Yeah, because it's hard. I do feel there's still a little bit of shame in there. I'll be honest, but I know I have nothing to be shameful about. Just have to get there.
Yeah, I think everything, it seems to be it's progress, right? So, like when you first went in there, you were probably meeting with your doctors and your therapist more, but like you said, you developed that trust. So your program has changed. So you have a little more leeway, and now you're being able to share your story with other people, and you're also able to. I mean, you're sharing it right now. There's going to be a lot of listeners that can, I'm sure, either relate themselves or maybe they have a family member or a friend, because as you mentioned, heroin is such a common issue right now. I mean, you see on the news, there are heroin needles, on playgrounds or on beaches, or, the opioid crisis. I just feel like it's such a big issue right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And, and it's affecting, just like the judge said, all walks of life. Yeah. And it's scary. And, I often talk, with my addiction counselor just about the people coming in, the new people coming into their programs, when I see them. And the other day we were just talking, and he told me a really scary thing is that it's been a few months since they've seen a positive heroin screening, which means that what everybody is doing is this ridiculous, super potent Chinese fentanyl, which is really, a huge issue with causing people to overdose because they don't know what they're getting. Yeah, and so it's even scarier now that they're not even seeing heroin anymore. It's all this fentanyl.
And those are the cases where the ODs happen more frequently?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and the issue he was telling me that is happening now is that the stuff is so strong that a lot of one of the two main medications used in recovery doesn't even deal with it. It doesn't even help. They have to go right to methadone, which is not the optimal thing to be on. But yeah, it's a scary time, and again, I'm just grateful that I was able to stop and ask for help and be ready to take help when I did.
Right. And I think hearing your story, it sounds like, support played a huge role in your recovery. And it's interesting because, things have changed, and, the marriage and the moving and the grad school and the child were all kind of pressures. But at the end of the day, it seemed like that phone call you got from your wife, that was really kind of like the last trigger of like, hey, like, I'm not going to screw this up this time. And like, that was probably a huge support for you to finally get to the other end.
Yeah. I mean, it's what I needed to hear. I mean, and my wife she's a super smart lady, and she, as soon as this happened, she kind of learned all she could about addiction. And after the fact, when she came to the conclusion that it's a disease, and her hard set, her line in the sand, it went away. But it's still what I needed to hear at that point was exactly that, because I needed to, I did not want to screw it up, and that definitely got the message across, because I didn't want to lose my wife, or my son.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about your, feeling the need to share your story. Do you have anything, in the works of how you can continue to share your story and help others?
Well, one thing I've been doing is I'm trying to gather all these stories of my childhood and addiction and everything together in a book. And hopefully, I'm hoping to be done writing it by the end of the year. At least that's the schedule I put out for myself, or the deadline. And it's, it's kind of a bizarre bio, how I grew up and what caused all these things to happen, and the addiction, and then, how I overcame it, and what I'm doing to continue to overcome it, and live a good life.
It's awesome that you're putting everything together and to good use too, to also help touch other people's lives.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, I don't know, I'm at this point now in my recovery where I need to help other people, or at least, let other people know that they can do it, that, it's a doable thing. I no matter how bad it might be, you can, if you want to, you can stop it, and you can change it, turn it all around. You can definitely do it.
Right. And you're living proof of that.
Yeah.
For people that would like to connect with you, where can they reach you?
Right now, I don't have any social media, which is kind of funny. I'm a holdout, or it may be a Luddite. I'm not sure, but
less distractions, though.
Yeah, exactly. But you can email me at david.recovery@cox.net. That's cox.net.
Okay.
And yeah, if you have any questions, or I don't know, whatever, I'm glad to help.
Perfect.
Do what I can.
I'll make sure to get your email from you and add those into the show notes too when I release the episode.
Okay.
So I have two final questions for you.
Okay.
The first is, given everything that you've been through, and the strides that you've have been able to overcome, what is your definition of adversity, and what does it mean to you?
Oh, okay. So I guess for me, adversity can be anything that stops you from achieving your true potential. And I think that probably sounds a little bit kung fu movie-ish, but I think adversity can be tangible, like a physical obstacle, like a handicap or impairment, or sometimes even another person, like in my case, my mother. But I think it also can be, more abstract, like a feeling or a thought, or a preconceived notion. I often think subconsciously that I create adversity for myself, which I guess can be both a bad and a good thing. But
yeah, I think that's really powerful because, just as far as the relationships, it doesn't have to be, a physical, a disability, or an obstacle, but it can be relationships, or, it can be a lot of different things, like you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely.
So my final question is, what are 3 tips that you could give someone who's facing challenges in their life right now?
Okay, I think the first one would be, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, no matter what your situation might be, there are people who have gone through it or are going through the same thing, and there are people that not only can help, they want to help. They're there to help. And that's really an amazing thing when you think about it. So definitely don't be afraid to ask for help. And the second one would be, don't make excuses for yourself. And that might be a little bit harsh, but I think in my case, like, I had the uncanny ability to justify everything I did, depending, because of my addiction or whatever I did or what I needed to do. It was all to either stop from being sick, or actually I remember telling myself, oh, I need this. Like, for example, I have a family event coming up. I can't quit now because I won't be able to deal with that,
Right.
So I have to keep going, and I'll quit after that. And there's always something else that will stop you from doing it, so you just have to not make those excuses anymore, and just kind of just own up to the fact. And the last one, which I think is the biggest one for me, is just be grateful, for your situation, and for everything that you have. One of the things that we do, and now in my family, is like, when we do get to sit down to have dinner together, we always go around the table and we just give 3 things that we're grateful for that day, just to kind of bring it all together. And sometimes we're grateful for each other. Sometimes we're grateful for our pets. Sometimes we're grateful for something that happened in our day, but just to share it and to like say it out loud and to put it, out in the universe that we are grateful for all these things is a huge thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's something that's probably a lot of people lost in their homes is, sitting down, having dinner, and also, giving thanks or being thankful for certain things and sharing those things.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
So I just want to thank you, first of all, for the interview, but also I just want to acknowledge you for just the courage that you present of, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, allowing yourself to share your story. Because, I would imagine it's very difficult, for you to share it, and you're not only sharing it, with family members or friends, you're sharing it, with this podcast, you shared it with, the judge, you're writing a book, you're trying to help as many lives and as many people as possible. And you're basically being, a light and trying to guide others that, that they can overcome an addiction and be living proof that, there's light at the other side of the tunnel.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. So thank you again for the interview. It was great talking to you.
No problem. Take care.
If you enjoyed the show with David and would like to connect with him, then you can find his contact information on the show notes at laughatadversity.com/8. Also, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you go and subscribe either on iTunes or your podcast player, and please leave us a review. It's the easiest way for the show to be found by others and help change their lives too.